Hi everyone, my name is Valerie Rangel, and I will be the introducer, summarizer, illustrator, and fielder of our school-wide positive behavior support project. On the pro side for school-wide positive behavior support, we have Erin Monahan, and on the con in support of zero tolerance policy in schools, we have Raquel Patton. The type of debate you will see today is an informal debate. Basically, an informal debate is organized in a way that is more conversational. Each of the members of the group will deliver their information. Let's begin.
Show respect, follow all the rules. There's no better place than to be in school. Responsible, I take care of me. I have hopes and dreams, possibilities. I will show respect, follow all the rules. There's no better place than to be in school.
So you just watched a clip of the fifth graders of Congress Elementary School in Milwaukee, and they're singing about the 3 pillars of their school-wide positive behavior support. So you've heard responsibility, respect, and following the rules. So a little background information on our topic, which is the primary use of zero tolerance in schools ethical? And we're in support of positive behavior support interventions. The background on school-wide positive behavior support is that it is a systematic approach for schools to support student behavior in using a more analytical approach as opposed to zero tolerance policy, which results in immediate expulsion and suspension for students. School-wide positive behavioral support consists of a 3-tiered approach, with each tier appealing to the student body as a whole, a smaller group, and an individualized group. What is zero tolerance? Zero tolerance is the most widely implemented and scrutinized school discipline policy. A zero tolerance policy assigns explicit and predetermined punishments to specific violations of school rules, regardless of the situation or context of the behavior. And in many cases, punishments for a violation under this policy is severe, such as suspension and expulsion from school. On our pro side, Erin will be identifying more ways where school-wide positive behavior support is ethical, and it addresses problem behaviors in a school setting, and it preemptively addresses problem behaviors by reinforcing socially appropriate behaviors, such as on-task behaviors, punctuality, and respect for educators and other students. On the con side, zero tolerance is necessary to keep students and faculty safe when individuals are presenting with extreme or aggressive behaviors, such as self-harm or intent to harm others. It is necessary to keep schools in a safe place for students to learn and build meaningful relationships with their peers and educators. Zero tolerance when used effectively, protects educators as well as the students and fosters a safe environment for learning. Let's move into our debate with Erin.
First of all, before going into detail on school-wide positive behavior support, I wanted to review some of the ethical compliance codes that are significant to discuss before beginning the topic for this debate. Some of the ethics codes outlined by the BACB that are relevant include Ethics Code 2.09a, which states that clients have a right to effective treatment. Ethics Codes 2.09b that states behavior analysts have a responsibility to advocate for the appropriate amount and appropriate level of services and provide oversight when required to meet defined behavior change program goals. Ethics Code 1.01 pertains to the reliance on scientific knowledge and state that behavior analysts rely on professionally designed knowledge based on the science of behavior analysis when making scientific or professional judgments in the human service provision and when engaging in scholarly or professional endeavors. Finally, Ethics Code 2.08 pertains to considerations regarding punishment procedures and states that behavior analysts recommend reinforcement rather than punishment whenever possible. All of these compliance codes will be used to argue why positive behavior interventions and supports are ethical and the best choice when considering the alternative of zero tolerance policies that have been the primarily used in schools for many, many years. First, a little background on the beginning of school-wide positive behavior supports. Wienen et al. In 2018 said school-wide positive behavior supports were developed in the 1970s and the 1980s as a proactive approach to improve school-wide and organizational and social culture. Horner and Sungai in 2015 stated, school-wide positive behavior supports, also referred to as positive behavior interventions, or PBIS, is an example of applied behavior analysis implemented on a scale of social importance. Other experts in the field agreed with this stance. For example, Dunlap et al. Said, PBIS is an example of applied behavior theory. The statement is relevant to one of the ethics codes that all behavior analysts must be bound by ethics codes, is Code 1.01 and reliance on scientific knowledge. Behavior analysts are ethically required to rely on scientific knowledge, meaning that they can only implement those behavior interventions that are rooted in science and supported by research. Raquel?
So, what to expect from zero tolerance policies? So, Halpern, Benson, and Schumann talked about how they're based on school office discipline referrals, used to assess their overall school culture and behavioral support needs. It varies across teachers as long as the inappropriate behaviors are defined operationally, comprehensive, and individualized. Traditions of tiers are based on referrals and they're not based on direct observation.
To summarize the points, the framework of school-wide positive behavior support follows the BCBA Code of Ethics in the areas of scientific knowledge, indicating behavior change programs must be designed in the areas of scientific knowledge and with the support of research. Client rights to effective treatment, as well as client rights pertaining to punishment procedures. Reinforcement is recommended rather than punishment procedures whenever possible. Bailey and Birch, 2016. Zero tolerance procedures follow the traditional methods of disciplinary referrals. Staff may choose what level of support the student or students may need based on the inappropriate behaviors exhibited. In zero tolerance procedures, behaviors are operationally defined to provide consistency to staff documenting occurrences. Here we have the three-tier approach. This was pulled from Wienen et al. 2018. And this visual shows the multi-leveled approach of school-wide positive behavior support. So at the first level, which is the universal intervention, this could be seen as school-wide positive behavior support where all students participate. Tier 2, the middle goal, targets a specific group of individuals. So this could be classroom-based, where they follow a set of criteria. And the third tier is for individual students who require their own individualized positive behavioral support plan.
As Valerie said, School-wide positive behavior supports is a multi-tiered approach. The tiers are divided into 3 levels, and the schools will decide who falls into each of those levels. This tiered prevention logic has direct application to both academic and social behavior supports. Tier 1 supports all students and is often referred to as the universal tier. Tier 2 supports smaller, more targeted groups and that are deemed to be at risk. Those students who may be in need of just a little bit more intervention. And Tier 3 focuses more on targeted intervention, more on the individual level, and those who are displaying more severe problem behaviors. This pertains to Ethics Code 2.09b, requiring behavior analysts to have a responsibility to advocate for the appropriate amount and level of service to meet defined behavior change program goals. In opposition, the con side, you will see that zero tolerance policies does not call for any kind of tiers or levels or looking at the individual or any kind of case-by-case basis for behavior problems. The 3-tiered approach in school-wide positive behavior supports was borrowed from the community health field and first implemented in the education field by Hill Walker. The logic that is used in school-wide positive behavior supports, from defining the organization or the school's most valued outcomes, such as reading, writing, math, and social behaviors, and selecting research-based procedures and interventions to implement in order to reach or achieve those outcomes. This is from Horner and Sungai 2015. This also pertains to Ethics Code 1.01 and our duty to rely on scientific knowledge. Raquel?
On the opposing argument, is it possible to provide consistency using school-wide positive behavior support? Hawkins, Vincent, and Schumann, 2008, shed some light on this point. By providing a Tier 3 intense support, it shows that it's time-consuming and resource-intensive in nature and are only used on students who engaged in the most severe problem behaviors and who fail to respond to Tier 2 basic and modified interventions.
In this portion of the debate, we've introduced the 3-tiered system of school-wide positive behavior support. Each section of the 3-tiered system supports the needs of students school-wide. School-wide in a small group, such as classroom, and on an individual level. Opposing argument begs the argument whether school-wide behavior support can be implemented universally on the school-wide level, and whether extensive training with staff may be cost and time-consuming to their school.
In a study by Wienen et al., the researchers followed students for 3 years in a Dutch school. The study was the first of its kind to study the impact of school-wide positive behavior supports on teachers' perceptions of all children in the classroom. The results of the study revealed a relatively small increase in prosocial behavior, but also identified some of the reasons the impact may have been small. One component identified that may have contributed to the low impact of school-wide positive behavior supports was the relatively low levels of problem behaviors seen among students at baseline at this particular school. It would allow for only a small window of opportunity for improvement. There are many cases studied highlighting the success of school-wide positive behavior supports. In a study by Madigan et al. In 2016, the authors evaluated the long-term impact of school-wide positive behavior supports in the area of academic achievement of 26 schools using a specific model of school-wide positive behavior supports called Safe and Civil Schools, the School's Foundations Program, which is a specific intervention used in the school setting using behavior management practices generally referred to as PBIS. School-wide SWPBS and PBIS are used synonymously in a lot of these research studies. The study in particular looked at the baseline data for 5 years using an intervention cohort schools as well as 28 control group schools, and they compared the results. Post-baseline, the control school The schools who were not receiving the intervention of PBIS exhibited an increase in academic index scores of 2.3 per year. The intervention cohort schools exhibited academic increase of 6.7 points per year. So those using the foundations increased by 6.7 points per year as opposed to the control. Overall, the schools using PBIS increased academic index scores at significantly higher rates than the control group schools. In another case study, which was called Shifting from Reactive to Proactive Discipline in an Urban School District, the authors review the results of implementing PBS, Positive Behavior Support Plan, at a school called North Elementary School in an urban area of Illinois. 1 year after implementation, the PBS data revealed a 22% reduction in overall suspension rates in the 1998 to 1999 school year, and also in the 1999 to 2000 school year. Less data-driven changes were also noted at North Elementary School, including a reduction in staff turnover and a more positive school climate. The illustrator will now review the data outlined by Madigan et al., and the graph data reveals success in using the Foundations program, which was a positive behavior supports method. Valerie?
Thank you, Erin. These are the results of the Foundation study by Madigan et al. In the first figure, figure A, you will see the Foundations program versus the control group that did not participate in the intervention of Foundations, but engaged in formal training of positive behavior support intervention. And here we see within the first 5 years, this is baseline data. And 3 years after is actual data they collected with intervention, with the fourth year being a maintenance year. So as you can see, data has increased on academic index. And in table B, you will see projected figures. So this is what Madigan et al. Study would look like for future.
Okay, so on an article by Fink in 2020, he stated that changes began in the late 1980s and quickly gained momentum, fueled in large part by raising of the rates of juvenile arrest for violent crimes and a climate in which young people were increasingly seen as dangerous. Feeling the pressure to do something, Congress applied the rhetoric and intention of tough on crime laws to the school environment and passed the Gun-Free School Act in 1994. Zero tolerance policies grew out of the Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1994, which requires districts to expel students who bring a weapon to school for no less than a year. However, the Act narrowly defines weapon as knives. Defined weapons and knives, for instance, are not included. So it's not very objective and gives schools leeway to modify the punishment on a case-by-case basis. It wasn't until 2011, though, when the Department of Justice launched the Supported School Discipline Initiative, which started to educate administrators and teachers about alternative discipline. They included restorative justice and multi-tier behavioral health programs, which are designed to help kids improve their behavior while keeping them in school. An example of this was taken from New York City schools, in which suspensions increased 130% between 2002 and 2010. The minority and disabled kids are 2 to 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled. And at least once in 2009, 2010, 7% of public schools students were suspended. Moreover, Jefferson 2015 analyzed zero tolerance as defined by the NYPD, whom characterized it by the non-negotiable aggressive enforcement of PD crimes through sweeps, saturation patrols, massive roundups, and large-scale expulsions of undesirable individuals.
We have reviewed a case study by Madigan et al. 2016, which indicates with the use of school-wide positive behavioral supports, regardless of formal training, an increase in academics and student compliance was observed over a span of 4 years. Opposing argument has stated zero tolerance policies keep the students as well as staff safe in an environment that extreme inappropriate behaviors such as aggression or consistent threats on lives of students or staff occur. Zero tolerance policy was created to maintain a weapon-free zone within schools. If a student is not found in compliance of maintaining a weapon-free zone, they will be expelled. The method of expulsion has not necessarily increased the compliance or academic state of students within the public school system.
I agree with Raquel's points about zero tolerance and its failure in public schools. I have found very similar research that highlight these points. The following points are closely related to the following ethics codes and specifically relate to why school-wide positive behavior supports is an ethical approach for use in schools. The noted ethics codes that relate to the following research are 2.09a, also going back to the client's right to effective treatment, and ethics codes 2.08a that behavior analysts are recommend reinforcement rather than punishment whenever possible. King, Brown et al. 2013 noted zero tolerance policies have been a failure in public schools time and time again. In an article, the article also investigated the effects of zero tolerance policies, and the authors review zero tolerance policies and their effect on students by reviewing and citing several empirically validated research studies. King and Brown state the culture of discipline has changed profoundly over the past 25 years, and in many cases has become much more formal and rigid, with severe punishments being applied more broadly and without any regard or consideration on a case-by-case basis, or giving any regard to the context of the situation. Beginning in the 1980s, zero tolerance policies began to take hold, and in 1994, as Raquel mentioned, the Gun-Free Schools Act of 1994 was mandated by Congress. As a result, the massive increase in high school suspensions and expulsion rates were seen. From 1973 to 2010, the rates of high school students being suspended or expelled from their schools increased by 40%. This is in direct violation of Ethics Code 4.08. To further the point that zero tolerance policies practices are unethical, the article by Brown dove into the data that back why these policies are not effective and contribute to poor overall outcomes for students throughout their lives. Brown noted the results of the study done in Texas by the Council of State Government and Public Policy Research. In this study, students entered 7th grade at several Texas schools, and they were tracked for 6 years. They found that 60% were suspended or expelled at some point in middle school or high school. The majority of these times, these exclusionary methods were used for offenses and simple violations that were never meant to be under the zero tolerance mandate. It is only ethical to implement interventions that are effective, keep kids safe, and foster an environment that is conducive to learning. No research on zero tolerance has demonstrated that zero tolerance policies make schools more safe and more orderly. Raquel?
Yes, so Ken, Throne, Fratello, and Daftari stated how zero tolerance does not make schools more orderly or safe, instead of principals and other school administrators dealing with misconduct on a case-by-case basis, considering the circumstances of the event, the specific students involved, and the repercussions for the overall safety of the school environment. Many schools districts now have zero tolerance policies that greatly limit discretion in individual cases, involving the law enforcement personnel and mandate removing students from school instead. These policies generally require out-of-school suspension or expulsion of the first offense for a variety of behaviors, and initially instituted for possession of a weapon or illegal drugs, but now frequently it's also including smoking, tobacco, or fighting in school. According to Confuso and Kufel, the number of drug and violent offenses in schools increased substantially over the first 3 years of a nationwide implementation of zero tolerance policies. And some of the limitations in the research indicates that bullying is still rampant in many of the nation's schools.
Studies have shown zero tolerance methods to be ineffective in keeping drugs and weapons out of schools. The rate of student expulsion due to the possession of these items increases progressively through the years. Studies conducted by Brown et al. Reveal students in middle school have been found in possession of drugs and weapons, as well as engaging in acts of aggression. Expulsion rates have also increased as a result of this.
I agree with all of your points that zero tolerance tactics were meant to keep students safe and promote a more ideal learning environment. However, based on the data, this has backfired. It is unethical to continue to implement zero tolerance policies that we know through research do not keep schools and kids more safe. Zero tolerance excludes students from school, which contributes to academic failure and poor outcomes for their futures.
In addition, Hawking et al. Pointed out some drawbacks that school-wide positive behavior supports have. They will require staff training for consistency in delivery and data, especially at the tier 3 level, in which expertise from people familiar in the field of applied behavior analysis should be consulted in. In order to conduct a functional behavior assessment, a BCBA must determine the function of the behavior, develop an implementation plan, train staff in how to implement the intervention, collect data, and follow through, as well as monitoring implementation. So therefore, maintain treatment fidelity to achieve the intended outcomes is essential. There's also little evidence-based resources on how to train personnel in order to effectively use these resources obtained from the functional behavior assessment. Additional cost due to training and spending for reinforcers is time-consuming, although effective. Individualized consulting and development of plans range between 10 to 23 hours per student, not accounting for school personnel during implementation of the intervention. It's also important how buy-in of administrative leadership. Oftentimes, this requires a lot of effort from the leadership team to conduct an FBA to provide the high level of support without consulting expertise on these type of services. Furthermore, it is a reliable source. Reynolds and Showitz, 2009, study the consistency of the effect sizes reported in research studies. Its use is small compared to school sizes and indicating a strong treatment fidelity. It can also be seen as controversial because many studies do not use samples of typical students currently receiving these type of services.
Zero tolerance policies were designed to keep students and staff safe and to promote a safe environment conducive to learning. School-wide positive behavior support believes it is unethical to continue with a method that consistently shows no progress. It is also mentioned that methods of expulsion negatively affect academics as students are not allowed to attend classes. Opposing argument reviews the consistency when developing school-wide positive behavior support plans. There is a concern with consistency in training and implementation. There is little to no literature available providing institutions with techniques and strategies to implement school-wide positive behavior support consistently and effectively.
As with any type of intervention, school-wide positive behavior supports can be affected when implemented correctly. Yes, it would require more staff training, data collection, and proper monitoring of the intervention. However, once staff is familiar with the intervention, it can be successful and is a preemptive or antecedent strategy that keeps kids in school, promotes pro-social behavior, and academic success.
These are valid points. However, how does zero tolerance apply to children with other diagnoses, such as autism, who engage in attention or escape-maintain behaviors? So, for example, the child hits another student and he gets suspended. Child gets to skip a day out from school, spending the time at home with the caregivers. So, is this intervention effective? How are we supporting the student?
Oh. To summarize that, positive behavior support stresses the value of added costs and time to implement school-wide positive behavior supports effectively. School-wide positive behavioral supports may also be a way to help students with autism and other intellectual disabilities that have been unfairly subjected to zero tolerance policies, regardless of their learning profile and diagnosis. In conclusion and final points.
Yes, this is exactly why zero tolerance policies do not work. They do not take into account the context of the situation and the needs of the individual. As for kids with more individualized needs, the support tiers outlined in school-wide positive behavior supports models would take into account the need for further assessment and support. Those in need of more individualized support would receive that support as outlined in the tiers of school-wide positive behavior supports. In conclusion, it is ethical to implement those practices that promote academic success and promote pro-social behavior while keeping our kids in school. The research shows implementing interventions such as school-wide positive behavior supports leads to better outcomes for students, both long and short term. Ethics Codes 2.09a, which relates to the right to effective treatment, is a significant ethics code to take into consideration when considering these types of interventions. If we know zero tolerance is ineffective, then it is unethical to continue with this type of discipline system in our schools. School-wide positive behavior supports is proving to be more effective and a proactive way to promote pro-social behavior and promote positive academic outcomes.
Yes, to summarize, the implementation of zero tolerance policies is widespread, despite the lack of research evidence that such policies are indeed effective. These policies have been implemented in many forms, with staff interpreting the policies in many different ways, and with no direct correlation that zero tolerance policies decrease social violence or safety.
Thank you. And at this time, we will be taking questions. How do both sides of the intervention come together and function as a whole to provide support?
School-wide positive behavior supports can be used as a preventative measure in preventing unsafe and aggressive behaviors. When these measures are exhausted, zero tolerance criteria, such as suspension and expulsions, can be implemented as a consequence. School-wide positive behavior supports gives kids their opportunity for exhibiting safe behavior. They are given a set of expectations as seen in the video that we showed. That way they know what they're supposed to be engaging in, and hopefully the need for zero tolerance policies will be less, given that it is an antecedent intervention. School-wide positive behavior supports provides opportunities for students exhibiting unsafe behavior to improve or engage in alternative behaviors, which is not anything that is assessed through the zero tolerance policies. We can use school-wide positive behavior supports criteria before resorting to zero tolerance procedures for students and staff safety. In summary, I can see where there's instances where suspension or expulsion would be required. In cases where there's repeated violations or serious offenses that have to do with the repeated use of drugs or the repeated aggression that does, create a safety problem. I can see where eventually zero tolerance may be a procedure needed, or expulsion or suspension would be needed. But school-wide positive behavior supports provides that initial antecedent intervention that is much more effective.
Thank you. Question 2, how can parents support intervention or carry on with generalization within their homes?
Yes, so when implementing school-wide positive behavior support, schools should send literature to parents and or caregivers outlining the implementation plan that they have in place in layman's terms. Showing examples and non-examples can be given to encourage parents to offer reinforcement on their end in a form of praise or any other tangible reinforcers, and also highlighting consistency across settings for success, which will lead to parent and caregiver buy-in as well.
Question 3, where do you see the future research going in terms of school-wide positive behavior support?
I think that future research should focus on larger scale participant studies involving typical students who are receiving these types of services, as well as individuals with various disabilities. Showing more data could help buy-in of administrators and schools to show that these interventions do work and why they're so effective.
Question 4, have zero tolerance policies helped to create a school to prison pipeline for many people, as many people may argue?
Well, psychological research has suggested that suspension and expulsion are likely to further reinforce these type of negative behaviors by using zero tolerance policies as a punishment procedure and denying students the opportunity for positive socialization in schools and nurturing a distrust of adults, both of which inhibits adolescent development.
Number 5, if the costs outweigh the benefits, are there alternatives to zero tolerance that are more effective?
Some schools have adopted non-punitive approaches to deal with these types of issues that may have been targeted by zero tolerance policies. These programs include behavioral and cognitive skill building, character education, or targeted behavior supports for students who are at risk of violence or illegal behaviors. These programs include Reconnecting Youth, cognitive behavior training programs for behavioral disordered adolescents, Coping Power, First Steps to Success, and school-based intervention to reduce aggressive behaviors in maladjusted adolescents. However, I do not think the costs of school-wide positive behavior supports outweigh its benefits. Once in place, school-wide behavior supports can be very effective and a proactive tool that can be used to nearly eliminate the need for zero tolerance practices, which in the long run create a much larger cost for our society.
So at this time, that is the end of our debate, and we hope that we provided enough information for you to make informed decisions about where you stand on both sides of these issues. Thank you.